Hey, it's Todd Danieli, and today we're going to talk about 3D Studio Max 2024 and specifically the new Boolean modifier and OpenVDB option. I was watching something on television last week and they talked about the history of food and they showed the soft serve ice cream machine and what a big innovation it was. And as they were showing old clips of these ice cream cones being made and the soft serve coming out and swirling around, I thought that would be a great application of using OpenVDB to melt the mesh together. So without any further ado, I'm going to go into Max here and show you how to achieve that. So this is what we're going to try to get, and you can see what it looks like. This looks very similar to what I saw on television, and this is where we're hoping to end up with the ice cream. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Splines and Helix. I'm going to go to the perspective viewport and just click and drag out something. Not worry about any dimensions, just initialize it, which you can see here. And what I'm going to do next is come over here and talk about the first cool thing within 3D Studio Max, which has been there for a while, but I don't know how many people know about it. So usually in a production house, if I'm working with Max, with other Max artists, I tend to use inches just because I'm familiar with them. But lately I've been working on content for Unreal Engine and putting models into Maya or giving them to people to work with Maya. So I've been using centimeters as a unit that's very transferable and universal between those applications. So we see centimeters are listed here in my parameters. That's not an issue because in 3D Studio Max, you can add your values in this box by highlighting it and just saying I want 0.5 inches and hitting tab or enter, and it'll convert that to your centimeter value, which is 1.27. So the other radius here, I want to do 2.5 inches. If I tab that out, it works. And then the height, I'm going to say 5 inches. This way you get a decent amount of ice cream. And there we go. I'm going to just maximize the perspective viewport, Alt and W. I'm going to zoom in with Z. And sure, that's the right dimensions, but it does not look like the reference yet. And all we need to do now is turn up the turns value. So I think it looks like in my reference there's about 5 swirls. I'm probably going to go for 4, somewhere in the neighborhood of 4. Let's just type in 4 to be exact. And then you can see kind of like there's a little hook here. I want to just back it off just a touch like that, because I'm going to add spline to this and I want to be able to really art direct this piece here. So just having it be on the upswing and not really at a point where it's turning too tight, this sort of works for me. So now it feels a bit more like the reference. What we're going to do is add edit spline, and you can see the new menu system here. When I do ED for edit, it's a much shorter list, and there's edit spline. And if we look at the vert count, it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's not what we need. So above that, I'm going to put OP, optimize spline. And now what we do is show the knots. We see our original vert count. And then by percentage, we can reduce it. And I want to just reduce it so that the curvature is very similar, which it is. And we have a decent shape, which we do. So 94% seem to work for me. You can tailor that as much as you like and play with these values. So now that we have something more manageable, I'm going to once again add an edit spline. And what I'm going to do now is go to segment, and there's the refine button over here. I'm just going to click right there and add a vert to it, and then turn off refine, or you may be clicking on and adding more. So now the vertices, the last 2 here, I'm going to move around in order to create this shape of this little swoop that comes. And that's when they get to the end of the cone, they release the pressure, and a little bit of ice cream coming out of the tip curls over. And it looks really natural, and you want that. So what I'm going to do is take these 2 points and move them up, move them over, and then I'm going to grab just the last point here. I'm going to move that further out and down a bit. And it doesn't look right, obviously. So now what I want to do is manipulate the Bezier handle along an axis. So I want to go along the Z-axis, so I'm going to click on the Z-axis and move that handle up along the Z. I'm going to rotate. It's always important to check all your views. I'm going to use the X, and I'm going to just click on it, and then I can move it along the X, and that just feels a little bit more, I don't know, pretty or smooth. So I'm going to keep that. And now we have the extrusion done for now. We're probably going to have to edit it, honestly, but that works. That feels more like this image. So if I go to front viewport, what we need to do next is we have the path. We need to make the shape of the ice cream that comes out. So It looks like when you make a cake or you go to an ice cream shop, they have like a star tip on the end of like a cake bag, or the ice cream machine has a tip. So we happen to have the star listed. We're going to just go to the base here. I'm going to drag out a star. And through trial and error, when I did a test run, I found that if the outer radius, if I get to the same level as the next curve here, so the next step on the helix, that it worked out pretty well. I'm going to go with 5 points just for this example because it seems to look better to me. And the thing is, you have an inner radius and you can adjust that in or out. Now, if you go too small, you could have a situation where later when we get to the Boolean and the retopology, you have these gaps, and that's not going to be what you want. It's going to require you to go back and edit. So what I'm going to do is probably go something in this area where it's a little past being perfectly perpendicular or straight here. I'm going to go a little bit bigger than that and figure that's a pretty decent value. And maybe just a touch smaller on that outer radius. Now I'm going to go to perspective by hitting P. And we have the helix and we have the star. So now what we need to do is extrude the star along the helix. So if we go to compound objects and we hit loft, because we have the shape selected, we'll say get path and click on the path. And you can see we get something that sort of looks like the ice cream, but it's not exactly what we want. So what I'm going to do is actually go, we do have the ability to change some things here, but before I get into that, I want to go back to the star. And I'm just going to Alt-Q to isolate that a little bit. And we're going to maybe mess with the values here. So turn the loft on. I'm going to just say the outer radius, tweak it a little bit. And that feels a little better to me. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to keep that. So now the loft is there. And there's a few things we can do to make it look more natural because it looks very mathematical right now. And the thing is, if you have a sub-object like path or shape selected, there's no ability to edit. But if you click on loft, you have scale, twist, teeter, bevel, fit. So we're going to use the light bulb, click the scale. I have a value saved for some reason, so I'm just going to just get rid of everything here, delete those, and then we're at the base. So what I want to do now is add a couple points. And what I want to do is specifically taper this tip, and maybe at the bottom have it be a touch wider. So I'm going to first work on the tip where it hooks over. And what I'm going to do is add 2 points. So I'm going to add a point here, which is toward the top, and here towards the bottom. Grab this move tool, and I'm going to take this point here, which represents the very tip, and maybe move it down like that. And then the second point here, I'm going to convert to a Bezier smooth just to make it a more natural flowing kind of transition, and leave it at that. And then the bottom point, I'm going to make it just a touch wider so the bottom's bigger. And make this a Bezier as well by right-clicking and clicking Bezier Smooth. And I'm sort of happy with that. I might just pull this down a little bit more, and that's fine. So that looks pretty decent. I feel like this hook should be a little taller. So this is where it's kind of cool. We can go to the helix, and I'm going to just turn everything else off for a second and grab these because we're still in edit spline. I'm going to grab these and turn the loft back on. I'm going to edit those points that I have selected, just move them up a little bit. You can see it kind of moves the swirl up, and I'm fine with that. It gave a little crimp there, but we're going to remesh and stuff later, so I'm not too concerned. So this is a good point that it's still editable at this point to do whatever you like to it, just knowing what to use. So the loft is there, but you also have the elements that build the loft, which are the star and the helix. So now that it looks a little bit better, there's sort of an irregularity in the flow of this, so I want to kind of mimic that procedurally. So I'm going to just go to the twist and turn it on, and now what we're going to do is split the distance between these 2 points by adding a point there, and then split the distance between all the points just like that, and select these 2 points, and just with the move we're going to move them upward a little bit, right click them, make them Bezier, and we're going to take the middle point, move it down, right click it, make it a Bezier, and maybe pull the handles out a bit. And that just adds a little irregularity to the mesh. So let's see, before and after, it just feels a bit more natural. So I kind of like that, and I'm cool with that result. So that's what we're going to do. So now we have our loft and we have our mesh. what do we want to do next? Well, the more we work on this, the more we want it to be a solid mesh is how I feel. So we don't want all these big openings. Because we lofted, we have an opening here. So what I'm going to do is make a new primitive. I'm going to just go to standard primitives, sphere, auto grid, so that I can place it on this mesh where I want to. I'm going to just pick a point in the middle here and pull out a reasonable sized sphere like that and move it around so that it fills in the opening in the middle of the mesh. And the important thing is there's sort of a gap here. You want to try to eliminate these gaps now, because later on it becomes more work to do so. So I'm just moving this so that I fill it in and there's no overhanging edges. And you can see I'm a little bit outside of there. So I'm going to just change the size a little bit, move it further down, and just tweak this until I have something that plugs it up sort of like that. So I'm cool with this. And now what I want to do is, now's the fun part. So we can see the wireframe, that's the loft. And above this, I'm going to just add an edit poly, edit poly. And I'm just doing that for my own sanity to know, like, if this were complicated, I kind of use that as a marker mentally to know where I am with things, kind of like a placeholder or like a bookmark. So above that edit poly, I'm going to put a Boolean. So BO, the shortened list, we see Boolean. And what we want to do now is select this sphere. So you have your normal operands, which are like union, subtraction, slice, intersection. I'm going to just click on union, click the sphere. It may disappear or may not. It did not. If it does, it just may mean that you need to change your setting from mesh to OpenVDB, which we're going to do anyway. So right now that's combined, and I want to go to OpenVDB. And you can see it kind of destroys the detail. And the reason for that is the scale of the scoop or the swirl of ice cream and the scale of the voxel size. So because we're working in a realistic scale, this value is too big. So I'm going to half it to try it first, 0.5, and just see what that does. And it's still kind of wonky. I don't like that. So I'm going to just try 0.1. And that's not bad. It's still a little staggery and a little faceted, but we're going to remesh later. So I'm not totally worried about that. The other thing too is we could always adjust the value of the loft. So let's just keep that. I'm going to go to 1.1 and say that's good enough. Okay, and then above here I'm going to add a poly again. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to just make a new sphere for the top where there's this hole in the center of it. And I'm going to use auto grid, same options as before. Find a spot and do that. And then just move this around so that it doesn't interfere with the swirl shape, but kind of fills in the hole, just like that. I like that. And now we'll just add another Boolean. You could easily do the two operations with the sphere in one shot and not have to do the edit polys between. I just prefer that. It makes me kind of have like an organization to what I'm doing. So now we're going to use union again and click on the sphere. And I will say when you click it this time, you're dealing with a decent amount of vertices and stuff, so it may take a little longer depending on the specs of your machine. So just be prepared to wait a few seconds. So right now it's processing. When it's done, it should turn the color of the mesh, and it did. And the only problem now is that it's using mesh as the method, and we want OpenVDB. And you can see again that the value gets set to 1, and we want to use 0.11 as we did before. And there we go, we have this result, which looks pretty good. There's a couple spots where we have like this little hole poking through, and this is a good time to talk about making an edit. Okay, so you can see there's kind of like this little hole here, and these overhangs, there might be little spaces in between, so this is a perfect time to edit this down and make some changes at the base level. So the star, I'm going to select the star, and what I'm going to do is change the radiuses a little bit. So I want to go with the inner radius, and it's at 1.3. I'm going to just make it 1.5 to see what happens. And you can see it updated on the fly, and everything in the stack updated. And now we don't have that little hole we had. We do have a little overhang here and there, but that's okay. So that actually, that one edit helped quite a bit. So just to know that you can edit the helix, the loft, and the star all, and still have like a result come out that you like. So now that looks pretty cool. We're almost done. So with this now a solid mesh and the VDB working properly, it's a good time to do retopology. So I'm going to just hit RE for retopology. And now is we're going to keep it at reform because it works really well. And now's the time where you do some trial and error. I'm leaving pre-process on. Just a note that if you edit your mesh the way we just did and you've pre-processed, it may not update automatically. You may need to go after your edit, go to retopology, either reset and compute or just start over with it. But I think you can just get away with reset and compute, honestly. So I'm going to start out with 2000 as a value, not 200, 2000. And I'm going to just say compute and see what we get. It takes a minute to process. When it's done, we have this, which looks okay, but it looks a little too soft for me. So I'm going to reset and try 5,000. This rollout here for the face count is kind of finicky to me. I don't know if anyone else experiences that or not, but I don't really care for the way it works. I have to backspace, and then sometimes if I type, it wants to add to the end. So it's just something to keep your mind on. You don't want to have a value, like a ridiculous value in there, and hit compute. So 5,000 is a little better, but not quite what I want. So I'm going to go with 8,000. And due to trial and error before I did the video, I think this will work. So let's just compute that and see what the result is. And it takes a second. Depending on your machine, it could take longer. And there we go. So this, I'm actually happy with this. If I take the reference in here and look at it, it's very similar. You can add an FFD and tailor that shape at the bottom if you like. You can also, I'm going to do an edit right now where I'll soft select and change that ball a little bit. But everything right now is still editable. If you FFD above here, like a box, we'll do 333. Just keep in mind, some of this may break if you make edits later on. You just have to reapply it and make your edits. But you can see I could tailor that down a little bit if I needed to. If I go to front viewport and I put an edit poly above this, I can grab some verts like this ball. If you don't want that, you're probably going to make a cone to go around this or whatever. So it may not be so important that you do this edit, but you can select these verts, turn on soft selection, play with the value. I'm just doing it by eye because it's not tragic if it's not perfect. And you scale it down a little or just move it up. Put the move to view instead of local. And you can tailor this as much as you like, including the piece that's sticking out here. You can jam that in or tweak that as well. So it's highly editable. I'm going to go back to perspective really quick and just say that like right now, there's a little faceting, so you could adjust the loft value or whatever, but it's a nice looking result for what, like maybe 5 or 10 minutes worth of work. It's editable. You didn't have to leave Max if you didn't have access to ZBrush or something else. You'd have everything within Max in a parametric kind of way that you can edit. It looks good. If you were to unwrap texture, add the cone, and maybe some sprinkles, you'd have a really nice looking cone for previs or for a far shot where someone's holding ice cream, if that matters in a shot, or a commercial. You have like a really basic soft serve. And then the cool thing too is, well, 8,000 polygons is it? Let's see, 8197 isn't ideal. It's not bad. And the cool thing is the spacing of this retopology handled it so well that if you wanted to make a capsule and use either scatter to scatter the capsule as sprinkles along the cone, or use a script like Clovis Gay has a great script for scattering stuff. Whatever you want to do, you could scatter some sprinkles. So with the cone, sprinkles, and texture, this would be a nice looking asset and it took you 10 minutes to make. And can be art directed if someone chooses to tell you, oh, I want it to be this way, or finds a reference to some obscure cone that's been manipulated in Photoshop and says this is what it needs to look like. You know, sometimes you have to listen to these things that are really nonsensical, but you can actually tailor this to actually match that. And furthermore, you could take this, unwrap it, and bring it into ZBrush if you have access to ZBrush, and sculpt on it and really get something high detailed. And the last thing I'll say as far as the workflow is, this was a basic overview, a jump off point. You could always go into the teeter and scale and everything on the helix or the loft and say, add more detail to those things and maybe like make some waves or even edit the spline. Whatever you like to do, you can make this more detailed. This is just a tutorial to show you how to do it as a basic sort of asset. This is a jumping off point. So in closing, if you like what you saw today and you found it helpful and educational, please like the video and subscribe below and show some support. I'm hoping to build up a little bit of a viewer base, and let me know if there's something you'd like to see in a future tutorial. and hopefully in the future I'll also be migrating some of you over to Gumroad. I do have a Gumroad page, and I plan to like share and make some content that'll be more detailed and more production oriented. So until next video, thanks. Bye.